Well, good morning and welcome to the Chief Executive Board's webinar called The Future of Work. We're going to be talking about some of the trends and impacts and ecosystems and hiring practices today. This webinar should take probably between 30 and 40 minutes. And so I think that's about the time that we have scheduled here. But we'll just go ahead and move on and get started. I know that we have a couple of people that are continuing to join us here, but just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, so you can come back and revisit it at a future time if you want to have another look at it. So I'm your host today, Kevin Minton. I'm the CEO of Chief Executive Boards International, and so I'll be the one discussing today's topic. I'd like to ask you to stay tuned if you'd like to learn more about Chief Executive Boards, and we'll be sure to cover that at the end as well and how you can get in touch with us. So for today's discussion, here's the topics that we're going to hit on. We're going to talk about some of the trends post-COVID. I know that we're saying that, we're kind of post-COVID in a post-COVID environment, even though that we're seeing a little bit of a spike and an upturn here in the COVID situation. But business tends to be moving forward right now. We're going to talk about some of those impacts that the trends are having. Then we're going to dive into what the ecosystem's looking like. And then we'll wind up kind of closing this out with some of the best hiring practices that are taking place in today's current environment. So let's take a moment here just to look at some of the most impactful post-COVID-19 trends or the possibilities with today's workforce environment, along with some of the considerations for which you might wish to take into account. So let's start off with that first trend. Basically, there is a population of overlooked talent in the workforce today, and that's people with disabilities and older workers. The United States has a job surplus of more than 1 million open positions, and there's a record high labor shortage across 12 of the 15 largest world economies right now. At the same time, we have two large demographic groups that are underutilized in our workforce, and that's people with disabilities and people over the age of 55. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and NPR, people are living longer and retiring later, and workers 65 years of age and older are America's fastest growing cohort. According to the United Nations, the U.S. Census Bureau, and the ADA National Network, 1.5 billion people, including 40 million Americans and 30% of Americans over age 65, live with a disability. So while employers haven't struggled to fill open roles, people in these groups, they face higher rates of unemployment around the world. In 2021, organizations must make a concerted effort to reach out into these untapped talent pools and create accessible, inclusive environments where these employees can thrive. Welcoming these populations into the workforce demands that executives reconsider diversity and inclusion and accessibility. So let's take a look at some of the considerations for overlooked talent today. The first one is we need to be able to invest in accessible technologies and physical work facilities to support these demographics. The second one is we'd like to say that we need to make adjustments for underrepresented groups rather than accommodations, which imply hardship for companies. Might want to consider more flexible working arrangements for older workers. And then lastly, I think we want to explore non-traditional, maybe a cyclical rather than a traditional 9 to 5 or a 40-hour work week for this type of talent, because their schedules are typically a little bit more flexible. They may have other demands on their time. They may be watching grandkids or whatever the case may be. And traditionally, those that are disabled, it may take them a little bit more time, or they may have different needs to be able to get to the office or to be able to accommodate that kind of work. So let's move on to the next trend here, and that is a complicated balance between employee trust and data privacy. So Europe's General Data Protection Regulation and the California Consumer Privacy Act are really a good first step, but the global data privacy crisis is only beginning. Many people feel they've lost control over how their personal information is being used, and those concerns are now making their way into the workplace. I don't know about you, but I don't know how my mobile number has gotten out, but a lot of people, I'm getting more spam calls today than I ever have, and on my personal phone, on my business phone, on my work cell phone. And so because technology companies, they've shifted consumer expectations around transparency, employees, they're now adopting those same expectations at work. So let's talk about some considerations for creating trust with these employees. First of all, employers should be transparent with their employees. And the way they should do that is there's 3 simple questions that you should probably try to answer for employees as you're bringing them on board, or as they start to express these concerns. And that is, what data is being collected? Why do you need it? And who controls it? Because they want to know exactly what you've got, why you need it, and is it getting out there? Is it getting spread? Are you selling it? Are you using any of this data in ways other than, just consideration for employment? So there's a quote by the Globe and Mail that I thought was pretty accurate. It says, workforces with high trust and leadership are twice as likely to outperform in revenue growth and customer loyalty. And I've noticed that too throughout the businesses and companies that I've dealt with, that if you have a high trust with your employees, they're much more willing to go above and beyond in order to support your customers, to work cohesively, to work with in the company to support the growing mission. So these are just some of the considerations that you might want to take into play here, because there is a distrust out there among employees that are coming into a company now about transparency with their data. All right, trend number 3. Want to look at building adaptability into your workforce. So to survive rapid technology shifts, we've got to build adaptability and resilience directly into our workforces. Many organizations have paid lip service to shifting recruitment toward critical professional skills like self-awareness and empathy. But the reality is, too many business leaders and recruiters are still prioritizing technical skills that may be obsolete in a few years. So businesses have changed. We've had to make some adaptations here through the COVID environment, and that's only accelerated. And what we need is our employees going forward to be able to exert that kind of a skill or trait, to be able to have some adaptability in what they're doing, because what they did yesterday or today may not be needed going forward. We may need them to show some flexibility in maybe doing a different job or adapting a different skill set. So that's one of the things that you might want to be looking for as you are recruiting people or training your people or engaging with your employees in your current business. So let's talk about some of those considerations for building adaptability. So first of all, CEOs are people who are running businesses. They're looking for growth. They're looking for ways to create growth in their company. And so what we need to do is give an opportunity for our employees to expand their skill sets. Offer some exploratory learning. Give them the time to expand their skill sets. Go online, take some courses. And it's also, when we do some analysis out there, it's one of the biggest factors for employee retention is being able to have that adaptability to adjust to the requirements of the business. The shift in working is creating a need for those who are willing and eager to go with the flow, learn new skills, take on possible new challenges, and cross-training employees on multiple functions and harnessing an employee's strengths are more desirable and productive and tends to lead to more longevity. The next trend is basically, we saw this during the COVID environment, is there's a larger shift towards remote work. A recent study by Gartner found that businesses have invested in technology to migrate a greater portion of their workforce toward working remotely. This has caused a significant ripple effects with a realization of higher efficiencies, lower overhead cost structures, which aren't likely to recede anytime soon. As you can see, we've experienced a nearly a 20% increase in remote work capability and expectations post-pandemic. With today's technologies, remote work has become even more possible and desirable among society. The pendulum has swung toward a direction of finding one's peace of mind, living in a desirable location, creating balance over that of simply pursuing a meaningless living. Purpose-related work and the ability to perform under a flexible arrangement is taking precedence for those with adequate skills. So in considering a remote workforce, it's important to consider the critical skills such as work ethic, digital abilities, accountability, and how you go about identifying and recruiting the kind of employees who can perform in a remote work environment. So let's talk about some of those considerations here for a remote work environment. One is, do they possess the critical skills and competencies? Those are a different set of skill sets and competencies than when you had an in-person workforce. Now, there are some companies out there that have had a remote workforce, and they've adapted to this before the pandemic, or they started adapting to this prior to the pandemic. But the pandemic really accelerated this. And so there's a different set of skills and competencies that are required. You need to evaluate your current and future leadership, because it might take a different set of leadership skills to be able to lead a company or to lead a workforce that is working remotely or in a remote environment. And do they have the skills and the tool set or the arrows in their quiver to be able to do that? So you might want to evaluate, do you have the leadership in place, or can you get them adapted to being able to lead a partial or a fully remote workforce? Employee experience is also critical with remote workforce. I mean, you're going to want to take a look at this. Do they have an experience with being able to being able to work remotely? Can they adjust to that? And then, how do you manage the performance? What you're really interested in is the outcome. It's the activity and it's the outcome. So if they're doing it and they're able to be very productive, which some of these tools have allowed us to be able to do, is become more efficient and more productive, then what you're really concerned with is, how can you measure performance and how can you measure that they are delivering the outcomes and the activities that you're looking for? And then last but not least, how are you recruiting for these positions? So just to let you know, there was a recent poll by Monster.com in June that showed that 95% of workers consider leaving their jobs. 1/3 of these people said it was due to burnout. The second highest rated reason for wanting to quit, at 29%, was a lack of growth opportunities. Again, this was a poll, a very recent poll by Monster in June, as to there's probably going to be some turnover. There's people out there that are actively looking for new jobs, and part of that is because maybe employers might be asking some of their employees to come back to work in the office, and maybe they've gotten used to working in a remote environment, or they want to live in a different location than where they're currently living, and they're going to maybe seek another job possibly to be able to work remotely. So it's a double-edged sword. You may have an opportunity to pick up some talent, but at the same time, you probably want to be doing some stay interviews with your employees to see if they are looking at, if they're engaged with the company, are they happy in their current role and doing what they're doing? Would they be happy with a change in how they're working right now? So those are just some of the considerations for a remote workforce. Let's look at trend number 5. Employers have become a social safety net. The pandemic has increased the trend of employers playing an expanded role in their employees' financial, physical, and mental well-being. So support includes enhanced sick leave, financial assistance, adjusted hours of operation, and childcare provisions. Some organizations supported the community by, for instance, shifting operations to manufacturing goods or providing services to help combat the pandemic and offering community relief funds and free community services. The current economy has also pushed the bounds of how employers view the employee experience. Personal factors rather than external factors are now taking precedence over what matters for organizations and employees alike. Employing such measures as this can be an effective way to promote physical health and improve the emotional well-being of employees. So that's becoming a very critical factor in employees and what they're looking for in a company today. All right. Another trend that is becoming prevalent is contingency workers. They're becoming a growing population to adjust for work fluctuations to include the tremendous growth that many companies are seeing at the moment. It's getting difficult to hire people. And so there may be some of those workers out there that we're talking about, some of those that are over 55 or over 65, or that may be disabled, that can help you in the interim with a flexible growth program. And also when the pendulum swings the other direction. What happens when the pendulum swings the other direction and we see a contraction in the economy? That contingency workforce can help you with that adjustability. So a portion of your workforce, I know that in my prior life, we used to always look at having a 30% contingency workforce in our population as part of our workforce to help us to flex when we needed to flex. And so that can help you to fluctuate with the rising or falling demands of the business. Let's look at trend number 7. There's been a tremendous acceleration, and you're going to continue to see it, an acceleration in automation. According to McKinsey and Company, about half of the activities people are paid to do globally could theoretically be automated using currently demonstrated technologies. Very few occupations, in fact, less than 5%, consist of activities that can be fully automated though. However, in about 60% of occupations, at least 1/3 of the constituent activities could be automated, implying that there's going to be a substantial transformation in the workplace and changes for all workers because of automation. Let's face it, I mean, there's a current pull demand on trying to find employees and trying to find workers, and the wages are going up. We're seeing an inflation in wages, and what's happening is with a trend toward automation, there's going to become an inflection point, or there's coming an inflection point where machinery and automation and digital programs and things like that are going to be cheaper and faster and more effective than an employee that may be doing the same task or the same skill. And typically this technology, this AI technology doesn't get sick. They don't take days off. They don't need time off to go pick up a family member or to go to do different things, and so it's more, there's an inflection point where it becomes more effective, more efficient. And so there's a lot of businesses out there. That's one of the trends, and it is accelerating and will continue to accelerate. So let's talk about some of the impacts here. McKinsey and Company has reported that there's a need for some foundational skills going forward in the future workforce of today and going forward. So as workflow continues to automate, again, McKinsey and Company, they're advising that there'll be a need for improved foundational skills that help employees fulfill the following three criteria, no matter the sector in which they work or their occupation. And those three foundational skills are: one, you need to be able to add value beyond what can be done by automated systems and intelligent machines. So an employee has to be able to add value beyond automation. All right. The second one is that employees need to be able to operate in a digital environment. They have to have those digital skills, and they need to be working on those. And number three, adaptability. They need to continually adapt to new ways of working and new occupations. So McKinsey's research, you can see a little graph here on the right-hand side, and I know this is not very clear, but if you take your time and go back and revisit this, you can probably take the time to take a look at each of these. But McKinsey research has found 56 foundational skills that will help workers thrive in the future of work. And each of these skills, they're based upon a subset of four major categories, which include cognitive skills, interpersonal skills, self-leadership, and digital skills. So those are the categories, those are the skills that the employees of today and of the future are going to need to have or be working on going forward if they're going to be able to function properly and appropriately in the workforce going forward. There's a kind of a focus on dehumanizing of work. Right now, there's an impact that's going on where this AI technology is starting to have a pendulum swing here, where we're going back towards a dehumanization of work. So the acceleration in the rising cost of wages, human inefficiencies and errors, a lack of skilled workers, and improved developing technologies are leading toward a trend for dehumanized work. Digital artificial intelligence and robotics they're finding their way into not only repetitive tasks, but also tasks that require critical thinking and learning. As machines become faster and smarter, the overall cost of ownership is replacing the overall cost of workers whose salaries outpace technology, and they aren't as dependable nor as efficient. So the remaining workforce, they're going to be challenged with a required higher level of education, soft skills, leadership traits, communication, and adaptability for a rapidly changing work environment if they're going to compete in this automation that we're going to see taking place. All right, there's an emergence of top-tier employer brands. We're going to continue to see this. Prior to COVID-19, organizations were already facing increased employee demands for transparency. And employees and prospective candidates, they're going to judge organizations by the way in which they are treated the way they were treated during the pandemic. And now that the pendulum has swung in favor of the workers. Progressive organizations, however, They communicate openly and frequently to show how they are supporting employees despite the implementation of cost-saving measures. So for example, my 24-year-old son had a fantastic job with a well-established and respected financial management institution. However, he was recently recruited by a more progressive firm that's growing exponentially, and they're paying much higher salaries along with some of the cool perks and attractive benefits out there that's attracting this sales force or this workforce. All right, now we get into talking about the workforce ecosystems. Deloitte recently published that a growing number of companies, more than 8 out of 10, are outsourcing portions of their infrastructure, their back office support, and even portions of their labor force. This is due to several reasons, which include offering variability or the ability to flex up or down with the business requirements, turning fixed labor cost into variable labor cost. Outside providers can often do a better job or provide better expertise. And this model also increases workforce utilization by paying for what we use when needed. Due to new technologies and businesses that have come on the scene, you may wish to take some time to evaluate your external sources as a portion of your workforce environment. So, whereas we used to have a very large portion of our workforce was full-time employees, you may wish to outsource some of that, or you may wish to start exploring some of the gig economy that's out there. How can they help you to maybe increase your efficiencies, or you may wish to carve out a piece of your business that someone else could do a little bit better than say you could by doing it internally. All right, this leads us into the latest hiring practices. And so number one, hire based on skill, not necessarily academic credentials. The best businesses will hire on the basis of a worker's skill, not academic credentials. Given the rising cost of college, paying for college imposes a significant financial burden on most families. As more workers opt for alternative forms of training, the future of talent management will crucially rely on identifying talented workers among the more than 50% of the U.S. workforce who don't have a college degree. Number two, remote interviewing involves job interviews taking place using video conferencing software such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, and similar platforms, or specialized video interviewing tools such as HireVue and Montage. The recruiter, their colleagues, and the candidate joining a video call and interview as if they were having a regular face-to-face interview. The technology also facilitates collaborative hiring by making it easier for other departments to participate in the interview and selection process. Number three, in a tight labor market, most employees are evaluating the quality of work conditions and how they will be treated. So you're going to want to make sure that you're promoting and engaging with a positive employee experience at work. If you want to retain your talent, remember, you heard me say earlier that 95% of the people in their current positions right now have been reported in a recent survey that they would entertain, or they are looking for another possible job transition or job opportunity. So again, creating that positive employee work experience at work and engagement is going to be very critical today if you want to keep the existing employees that you have in a tight labor market. Number four, statistics show that businesses with a diverse workforce and inclusive workplace have better productivity and profitability. Many organizations are looking to boost the diversity of their workforce, in addition to making them more inclusive, and recruiters are responsible for identifying and bringing a wider diversity of candidates into the talent pool. So statistically speaking, the more diverse your workforce is, the more creative it's going to be, the better it's going to perform. So those are some of the latest hiring practices and trends that are taking place. And we have a couple of more here, so stay with us. So number 5, that contingent workforce that we talked about earlier. Over the past few years, there's been an upward trend in using contingent workers and creating a hiring process expressly for a contingent workforce. The talent acquisition process is different for contingent workers than it is for full-time employees. And the organizations need to be set up to seek out, recruit, and process these types of hires. Another hiring practice in the latest trends is adopting predictive analytics. HR, or human resources in general, is adopting analytics at a very rapid rate. The use of analytics across talent acquisition processes helps to deliver data-driven decision-making and insights to identify areas of strengths and weaknesses, as well as help reduce the cost of talent acquisition practices, identify problems and blockages in the process, and to fill vacant roles more quickly. Again, this is more of a predictive index that people are getting smarter at how we are hiring and more efficient at how we are hiring. It's very costly to hire someone and then lose them later on because of the investment that you have made into that person. So some of these predictive analytics are being very helpful and adopted at a very rapid rate. That leads us into AI, or artificial intelligence. And so one of the fastest growing areas of talent acquisition software today is the use of artificial intelligence to improve ways to source and identify and engage talent. These range from smart talent platforms such as Eightfold AI to job posting platforms, chatbots, and natural language processing, or NLP, capabilities. AI is also used to help remove bias from candidate identification, selection, and hiring. That's something that I see quite often. How many of us go out there and we hire somebody simply because we like them, or we've established a rapport for them, or we have a relationship with them, or they were a family member, or you name it, down the line. This technology helps us to take some of those biases out of how we go about hiring people. And AI is trending because the technologies can do a tremendous amount of the heavy lifting at high speed, while simultaneously adding some value and automation to the talent acquisition process. Number 8, assessing the skills and competencies and using them to source, screen, and match candidates to open vacancies is becoming a much hotter topic thanks to the power of artificial intelligence. While skills and competencies have been used in talent management for quite some time, particularly for identifying and matching successors to key positions or identifying career paths, they haven't always been used effectively in talent acquisition. Particular skills and competencies can be critical for hiring the right employees. So according to several sources, such as TechTarget, Inc. magazine, and Forbes, these are the top hiring trends most businesses are seeing in today's talent acquisition market. So I just wanted to share some of those developments and trends with you. We hope that you found this webinar insightful, and if you'd like to access it once again, you can simply send us an email and we'll send you a link, or you can visit the Chief Executive Board's website, select the Events tab, then select the Webinars tab to locate this webinar along with all the other previously recorded webinars. We also invite you to join us for some future webinars that we have coming up, to include how to solve dilemmas the right way. That's what we're going to host in October. And then in December, we're going to be hosting a webinar on generating creativity in your company. So stay tuned for more on those announcements as well. If you do have a question, I'll be happy to entertain them. All you have to do is just hit the chat box. If you want to ask a question, I'm happy to answer any of those. And I'll just wait just a moment to see if we have any questions come through. Okay, you heard me mention at the beginning that if you had a desire to learn more about chief executive boards, here's a couple of ways that you can do that. One, you can email us at info@chiefexecutiveboards.com. You can visit our website, chiefexecutiveboards.com. Give us a call. We love to hear from you, 864-527-5917, and ask for Robin Taylor. If you don't get Robin is out on vacation this week, you can call me at this number as well, or go to the sources out there, go to Amazon and order the book In Search of Balance. This will give you a lot of insight as to what we're doing at Chief Executive Boards and some of the effects that we're having upon our people who are participating. So at this point in time, this concludes the webinar. I didn't see any questions from the audience, so we're going to go ahead and conclude at this point, and we'll go ahead and say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. Have a great week.